Let's go for it.
Where are
Hey,
you, where are you located?
right now I'm in Northampton, UK.
Oh, you're in the UK?
Yes.
Oh, huh.
So it's about
But
6:05.
are you American?
Yeah, I'm American.
That's what I thought. How
Yeah.
did you end up in the UK? Did you marry a British man?
No, hopefully. Um, my parents
Yeah.
are actually here. So when the virus happened and lockdown happened, I just honestly saw it as an opportunity to come have a long stay with them. I haven't been able to do that, so I'm
Awesome.
here. Have you been before?
I was actually married to a Brit.
What? Wow. Did you live here?
I did not. We
Okay.
visited a couple times, but I've also been there on vacation.
Yeah, it's
So, yeah.
and back home I live in Texas, so this has been a breath of fresh air.
Uh, well, I grew up in Texas, so
Okay. And
yeah,
I saw that I think you went to the University of Michigan.
yeah.
That's where I'm from originally.
From
So
Ann Arbor, from
well, I'm
Michigan.
from Michigan, went to school and kind of grew up in Farmington Hills. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Okay.
so I've been all around.
Oh, look at you. That's wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
I just got a notification that they're okay with the change of the meeting, so let's go forward.
Okay. Well, I invited you on the show today, and I'm not sure if you looked at the purpose of the show, but Tea for the Queen is about keeping your sanity in an era of staying woke. So I try to tackle conversations that people aren't necessarily uncomfortable with, and just try to bring, I guess you can say, some calmness and saneness to them. And I brought you on here because I have dealt with an eating disorder in the past, and I've noticed that it's a topic that not a lot of people talk about, especially when it comes to Black women. Even when I was seeking like therapy, I did not. Sometimes I would get a professional who didn't believe me, just because of what the belief is for Black women. So I wanted to bring light to the topic and bring more of a discussion around it. So that's why I have you on here. So if you could just explain a little bit of what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. It's something that people need to hear about because many people, including professionals, do not think that Black women can have an eating disorder and often misdiagnose them or don't diagnose them as having an eating disorder, even when they can have the same symptoms as someone who obviously is white and has been diagnosed. So what my background is, I'm a specialist in eating disorders and addictions. um, I graduated from University of Michigan Med School and have a board certified in both preventive medicine and addiction medicine. And I also have an online program for people with binge eating, compulsive overeating, food addiction, and emotional eating. And I speak around the country on topics about African American women with eating disorders. And more recently, talking about staying woke, more recently I'm part of a group that does consulting with treatment centers
Wow.
on equity, anti-racism in the field of, eating disorders and addictions.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you like? What was, I guess, the impetus of you becoming or having the passion to start this mission?
Yeah, I think for me it started with both my family.
Mhm.
We have some of these issues in my family, and also I primarily in my career, at least in the first 20 years, worked with women. And
Mhm.
as you know, food and body image issues are really big issues among females
Mhm.
and also, among Black females. So that's how I got started. And I think for me, I really enjoyed the component of eating disorders that involves body, mind, and spirit. So my training I did a fellowship in integrative medicine with Andrew Weil's program in Arizona. So that holistic approach really fits well with working with people with eating disorders.
Okay. And well, So you said that you're interested. Well, you've been very excited to work with eating disorders with Black women. Now, why do you think that Black women aren't talked about in the aspect of eating disorders? When I looked up a person with an eating disorder, when I tell you I had to keep scrolling until I found a person of color, it took forever. It didn't take as long with men, but for me to find a person of color, it took a while on Google image search.
Oh my, okay.
Yeah.
I need to get my marketing person on that. Yeah, you know, I think there's a lot of beliefs, at least in the dominant culture, that, for example, that, you know, body image with Black women is not as big of a problem, that Black women are more tolerant of living in larger bodies, and therefore, you know, that means that they don't have eating disorders. There's just a lot of misconceptions, honestly, about eating disorders in Black women. And then honestly, there's a lot of bias. If you think about how psychologists and medical doctors are trained, all of the research has been done on white women, primarily with anorexia and bulimia, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, there has been uh, not a lot of research in people of color with eating disorders. You know, there are some articles out there, but there's not a lot.
Mhm.
And so I think psychologists and therapists and so on have been trained that this is a problem in, you know, upper class white women.
Mhm. And another thing I've noticed that when you go into to see your family doctor, if you're overweight and you tell them you have an eating disorder, well, you don't even have to tell them. You could say you're having some different behavior around food. The assumption is, okay, well, at least you're not overweight. And for me, I know I've had to deal with like the guilt of being overweight, and I think that went into my whole the psyche behind my eating disorder. But why do you think doctors do not? Why do you think they don't? Not necessarily believe, but why do you think that they think that Black women aren't supposed to be big? So it's a good thing if we're very thin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the medical profession is a little bit of an enigma for all of us. I'm in the medical profession, and I still think it's an enigma. You know, there's just a ton of weight stigma. Actually, medical professionals are the number 2 source of weight stigma after family members.
Wow.
So doctors have been trained for over 30 years that being heavy is, you know, bad for your health. It's bad for everything about your health. And now we have the COVID outbreak, and now they're blaming COVID on weight, you know. So it's just, it's kind of a blind spot in medicine.
Mhm.
And the newer research and more accurate research has shown over and over that it's not the number on the scale that is the cause of bad health. It's really more, you know, lifestyle factors, genetics, and so on. So, you know, there are many women who can uh, be living in larger bodies and be very healthy because they're active and they're, you know, they're eating well and taking good care of themselves. And there are many thin women who have bad health because they are not doing those things. But there's just a lot of weight bias. And, you know, I get that question almost every time I get interviewed because people think, well, your doctor should know, you know, they should understand this, but they really don't.
Now, you said that your doctor should know. One thing that I have always, I guess you could say, been an advocate for is that I don't know what happens in medical school. I haven't been before, don't plan on it. But I think that there should be a more holistic approach to doctors. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Is there an approach or an education of them understanding that there are more than just numbers and data when it comes to someone's health? Do they talk about how anxiety affects the body or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is changing, but you know, the studies show that it takes uh, health professionals 17 years to
Yeah.
change their mindset. So you know, you have generations of doctors who are already out of medical school, who haven't been trained that way, and, you know, that they're not going to change their viewpoints. So we have to kind of wait for another generation and hope that they're getting better training.
Yeah, I recall on your most recent, I did listen to your podcast, but you said that 10 years it takes, like the ones who are graduating basically have information from 10 years ago. So,
That's right. Yeah,
so they,
exactly.
it's like a cycle of, like, I guess you can say like a continuing education. Like you
Yeah.
have to go back and see what's new. And do the doctors have to make the effort themselves?
Yeah, but you know, most of what's new,
Mm-hmm.
what you're calling, every doctor has to do continuing education, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that is not about what's new and cutting edge. It's really more about traditional medicine. And that's, you know, that's one of the reasons why I did the fellowship in integrative medicine,
Mm-hmm.
because it does teach this holistic approach. And now, you know, Andrew Weil kind of started that whole um, thing of teaching integrative medicine in medical schools. And now there are, I think, over 25 medical schools that offer some kind of fellowship or residency component where they combine integrative medicine with traditional Western medicine. So again, things are changing, but it's going to be a while. So I think the best thing to talk about really is, what can women like yourself do if you go into a doctor's office and you need help and you're not able to get the help you need? Like, where do you look, and what kinds of things can help you, you know, get better?
Now, I did, and I also watched your TED Talk. I did a lot of research on you.
Thank
I
you.
admire you so much. Um, now, your TED Talk, you talked a lot about trauma, and I think that I like the word that you use, generational trauma. I don't necessarily care for the term generational curse, because to
Oh
me,
no.
trauma sounds like something I can do something about. And when I hear the term generational curse, I hear it in the aspect of, okay, this is just how we are. We can't do anything about it.
I agree with you. I don't like that term either.
So, how would trauma, how would it, I guess, manifest in someone having an eating disorder, specifically a Black woman?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that's actually, you know, doing my TED Talk led me to investigate my own family more, because we
Mhm.
had, like I said, so many of these problems that I myself was seeing in my patients. And when I looked back at the family, you know, many Black Americans can trace their heritage all the way back to slavery. And certainly in our family, we are able to do that. My grandfather was born on the plantation where his parents were slaves, and he, you know, he practiced medicine like, I don't know, 30 miles away from that self same plantation. And so, you know, when I looked at our family tree, as I say in the TEDx talk, you know, I start to see all of the mental illness, the, you know, problems with food and body image stuff, the addictions that were in our family. And it was shocking to me. So you know, I started looking deeper. And what I realized is that this intergenerational trauma, which is a simply defined trauma that's passed from one generation to children and grandchildren of future generations. And many people say, well, how could that be? You know, if they didn't experience the trauma, how could that happen? Well, the research started in the 60s with the Holocaust survivors and their offspring. And they were seeing that, you know, these people, their offspring had a lot of psychological challenges. And then Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, looked the same way into families of descendants of slaves, and found, you know, a host of different characteristics that seem to predispose them to an increased risk for, you know, depression, anxiety, um, obesity,
Mhm.
etc. So the way that it works is and the Adverse Childhood Experiences study that's run by the Centers for Disease Control has looked at this as well. And they have found that what happens in childhood changes the hardwiring of the brain, particularly affecting the dopamine reward center. And these changes then predispose a person to having depression, anxiety, eating issues, addictions, and over 40 medical conditions.
Mm.
So something happens to you as a child. It doesn't change your DNA, but it changes the expression of your DNA. And that's called epigenetics, where the gene is turned on or off by this trauma. And we know that little Black children, no matter what socioeconomic status they have higher rates of trauma and PTSD than white children do. So this trauma, and also the trauma of poverty or living in dangerous urban environments, sometimes all of these things then can predispose, Black girls and then women to having eating disorders.
Now, you said living in urban environments. Now, um, what I've heard before is that, okay, my parents moved us out to the suburbs in the
Yeah.
2000s with they call it the black flight after the white flight. And the assumption was that, okay, if you're a Black girl and you have an eating disorder, it's because you were around a lot of, I guess, white people. And
That is partially true, that the
okay.
more identified you are with the dominant or white society, the more likely you are to have gotten the picture that being thin is desirable.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So they call that acculturation. So the more acculturated a Black woman is or Black child is, the more likely they are to identify. And we've seen this, they did this, famous study in Fiji where, the Fijians were very happy with their body size and shape, and they actually glorified bigger bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, Western TV was brought to the island, within a very short period of time, they started doing extreme dieting and trying to reach the thin ideal. So that's what happens when Western society, comes into play. So that acculturation is part of what can predispose Black women who have been living in the broader society to think they should look like, everybody else does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, another expert I talked to, she deals with disordered eating. What is, as far as your definition as a professional, what is the difference between eating disorder and disordered eating?
It's just all part of a scale, like you know, at the far end of the spectrum is disordered eating, which kind of is the beginning of things. And then you have eating disorders of different levels of severity. So I think it's all part of the spectrum.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, that's how I would define it.
Okay. She said that she said that Black women are, and I haven't published the episode because I'm not sure if I necessarily agree. But she said that Black women are tend to be overweight because we have disordered eating habits due to the trauma of scarcity of slavery. Would you agree with that? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think we have any research on that, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's very far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
There that we know that um, if you look at other cultures where there have been periods of starvation,
Mm-hmm.
I think the Denmark who had the winter famine, and they saw that children who were uh, in utero, so before they were born, they went through that winter famine, had a lot of problems with eating and weight and so on. So it's not that far-fetched to think that possibly you know, that's one of the epigenetic changes
Mhm.
that could have happened during slavery for sure.
Okay. Now, another thing that I've always not quite understood is that I guess you could say in urban community you're praised if you're, you know, if you're larger, but in the suburban community you're praised if you're thinner. And me, I had kind of in the house, okay, outside the house thin, in the house you're getting too thin. So I was always trying to balance that, and you know, be from not too thin but not too thick, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what would you say to someone who's dealing with that right now,
Hmm. I,
especially in the age of social media? I'm sorry for interrupting you.
no, you know, I think that's a real problem. And, um, but I think the biggest problem is that we as women
Mm-hmm.
look outside of ourselves to see who we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And and you know, and that's one of the flaws I think that we experience. And particularly if you, it's, you know, it's harder to say, you can't say this to a child, but as a grown woman, I can say this to you,
Yes.
that, you know, I had to come to terms with, you know, who I am. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what can I sustain and be happy with? And stop looking out here for validation. And that's a hard process, but I think it's a more worthwhile process rather than me saying to you, oh no, you should, you know, you should identify with being thick. Just
Mm-hmm.
go for it, girl, do your thing. Or no, you know, you need to be thin because you have to be healthy. You know,
Yes.
there's all that healthism stuff. You can't be healthy unless you're thin. But I think it's really, I personally feel it's really sad in our culture that
Mm-hmm.
there's so much darn focus on this issue. You go, you know, I've traveled to Africa, I've traveled to many third world countries. Nobody's talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody is. People are the size they are. They feel they're, you know, I had a nanny from my youngest son from uh, Eritrea,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a bigger woman, and in the US she would have been considered too big. She thought she was the sexiest thing on earth, you know.
Yeah.
She was, I mean, she did.
She was, yes.
Yes. And it, her size didn't even, she didn't even consider size an
Mm-hmm.
issue regarding who she was, how sexy she felt, who she was going to hit on, you know, none of that. So I just feel we, as particularly as Black women, need to start. We need to go to Africa and visit our African sisters and get some training over there.
I'm trying to go next month. Like I'm really trying to go to Nigeria.
Yeah,
So what kind, have you been to Africa yet?
several times. Yeah.
And what did you notice? Did you notice any difference in body variety, or was it just an appreciation for different bodies?
Well, I mean, every uh, country, every population has changes in body, have differences in body size. I don't know if you've seen that video, Poodle Science.
No, what's
I'll,
that?
I'll, I'll send you the clip, but they
Okay.
talk about how if you look at the dog population, there are poodles, there are, you know, bigger dogs, there are tinier dogs. It's the same with humans, right? There's some of us are tall, short, you know, round,
Yeah.
skinny. That's just natural variation. And the fact that we're trying to all fit into one size is outrageous.
Yes.
And this all started actually during slavery. It started with the demonization of Black women's bodies.
Mm.
And the thin ideal was developed as a way to uh, portray white women as more morally superior because they didn't eat as much, they were thinner, they were very chaste, and so on. And in contradistinction to that, the Black women's bodies were sexualized. They were either portrayed as mammy or as, you know, sexualized beings, and their bodies were denigrated and felt to be, you know, demonic. And so that was the origin of the thin ideal. So now you can ask me that question again. Should I identify with the thin ideal or with being thick? Because that's the origin. It's from slavery.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the demonization, do you mind elaborating a little more on that, on what you mean by demonization?
Yeah, the demonization of the Black female body,
Mm-hmm.
I think, had to do with the complex social nature of slavery and the fact that white men were, raping women's slave women.
Mm-hmm.
And, there had to be some explanation made for why are all these white men leaving their marital bed to go and rape a slave. So this came out of that kind of phenomenon, which was an explanation. It was like, well, it's kind of the she made me do it defense.
Was it like it must be because she's a witch?
She's a witch. She tricked me, et cetera, et cetera. I'm under her spell. And I mean, if you've seen that movie, 12 Years a Slave,
Mm-hmm.
that guy was crazy. He was crazily obsessed
That's
with
what.
Patty, the slave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, the woman, the white woman, his wife, was extremely jealous,
Yeah.
even though she's not really realizing. Do you think Patty wanted to be raped by that man every day? Heck no.
No.
But she's seeing her husband preferentially go to a slave woman. So that's how that whole the thin ideal was moral superiority.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a better person because I don't have to overindulge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Christian, that it's now morphed into Christian women have to be thin and so on. But it's part of the legacy of slavery. It's a weird thing, isn't it?
It's kind of strange because slavery just seeps into every single legacy in society. Even when you don't think it's there, it's really rooted at every single thing.
That's why I liked the New York Times podcast 1619.
Yes, I love that
I
podcast.
know,
This is
isn't
so
it?
good.
It's such an accomplishment because it looks at all aspects of American society and how slavery impacted everything from music to fashion to, labor,
Healthcare, even.
healthcare,
Yes.
even the financial system, how the financial system was.
And
And
even the model for working, that was one of my particularly favorite episodes on how they used to how they determine. I don't know if you worked in retail before, but she connected it to retail based on how much you're pushing out and how much people are like pushing cotton from the field. It's
yeah,
like it's trickled everywhere.
I know. So that's why I think when you look at the thin ideal, you
Mhm.
have to look at it in the context of slavery and how it came about. And then you have to ask yourself, do I really want to continue that legacy?
No,
Yeah. I mean, because
no.
for me, I don't. I want to find my own level where I'm comfortable with my body. And it's hard because you go to the doctor and no matter what's wrong with you, they're going to say, "Oh, you need to lose weight." And that's been said to me
Yes,
too.
yes.
I am a doctor,
Mhm.
and I've gotten into a couple of fights with colleagues over that. And just like, you know what, my weight is really none of your business.
Mhm.
If I need your help, I won't come to you because you've never been trained in this issue. Doctors don't get any nutrition training. So for them to be talking about losing weight is stupid. Like, what are
Yeah.
you going to do? They recommend a diet to you. I'm like, I'm not going on a diet. Are you kidding me, lady? You know, you think I'm stupid?
Yeah, I think when because I've been recommended so many diets, it just puts you in like this perpetual state of being on a diet mentally, and it never stops. It's like every few weeks you're okay, like, okay, I need to get back on a diet. What do you have to say about the perpetual diet mentality that like we're told to be on?
How much time do we have left?
Not a lot.
Because you know what? That's my rant. This is
Okay.
where I feel women are so taken advantage of,
Yes.
and we've been so mesmerized by the thin ideal that,
Mm-hmm.
the diet industry, which is, mostly
Billion
rich
dollars.
white men, now Oprah, who a part owner of Weight Watchers, but the diet industry is over $65 billion industry. What could you use that money for?
So much to
So
get
much.
food where food should be, where people don't
Yeah.
have food.
And to help people have better access to
Mm-hmm.
activities, to help children who've been, traumatized, to help heal them. There's so much more, but I just think about all the women I know who have spent thousands of dollars on diets. And
Mm-hmm.
we have absolutely perfect research that shows that diets do not work.
Do not.
There was a 15-year study by the National Institutes of Health, $15 million study, 15 years, and people were unable to maintain even more than a 5% weight loss.
Wow.
And that's the biggest brains in our country trying to help people lose weight. And
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't. And they realized, this is more complicated than we thought. And the thing about diets is it just makes everything worse.
Yeah.
I talked to so many patients who were put on diets when they were 5 years old, and I just think to myself, what if you were never put on that first diet? What if you were never told that you needed to lose weight? And maybe you were, a little bit plumper or whatever than somebody else. So what? At least your life hasn't been taken over
Mm-hmm.
by dieting. At least you're not obsessed about your weight, that you can't enjoy life. You can't look for a husband. You can't find your perfect career because you're waiting to
Mm-hmm.
lose weight.
Yeah, I've
So
been in that space so many times where, okay, I can't do this until I lose weight. I can't find a new job until I lose weight. It just creates this ideal of worthiness based on your body looking like the dominant culture. It's really destructive.
you
Really.
need to go to Nigeria, because in Nigeria, in Africa, everywhere, even South Africa, Black is the dominant culture.
Mm-hmm.
So that shifts the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
You walking down the street, I'm skinny there. I feel bad because I feel like I need to gain some weight. No, no, I'm just saying they're just beautiful Black people naturally being
Mm-hmm.
whatever weight they're naturally supposed to be. And there you are part of the dominant culture, and people look at you and they're just like, oh, look at you. You're beautiful. You feel different.
Yeah.
You'll see. You're going to have to let me know once you go.
Oh, I will. I'll share pictures of with you and everything.
And I want you to tell me how you feel about your body when you're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about my body. I know that
See.
okay, I'll take your word for it. I'll take
No,
your
just wait and see. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't. But even when I go to Mexico, I feel a lot sexier than I do in the US,
really.
because there's just more body acceptance.
Mm,
Women in the US and in Western culture are living under, I don't want to get too
oppression.
political, but we're living under oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And one way that people keep us from being as good as we could be is the diet industry. Because
Wow.
if your woman is always worried about how she looks and she can't go for that promotion because she doesn't think she's good enough, because she's heavy,
Mm-hmm.
then who benefits from that?
Yeah.
White men.
Yeah.
Same as slavery, no different.
Wow. See, just keeps on seeping through.
And just see, slavery,
We keep it
it
all.
does keep coming back, doesn't it?
Yeesh. Well, I do have just a couple more questions for you. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Um, my last question is, how would someone who, if someone has a Black woman in their life, how would they help them with their eating disorder? if, you know, yeah.
Yeah. I think once you get to be an adult, you really, and you have an eating disorder, you need to have professional help.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's why this group of us are trying to train
Mm-hmm.
people in treatment centers to be more culturally competent so that Black women can get the help that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think once you have an eating disorder, it's better to deal with an expert. But if you have somebody you love who has an eating disorder, I have so many of my patients who have said, my husband has always loved me no matter what size I was. My husband has always told me I was beautiful no matter my size.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what is needed, but it's not gonna be enough.
And
It's
what
like
does, I'm sorry, go on.
no, go on.
What does professional help look like? How, you know, yeah.
Yeah, well, there are different levels of professional help. Like, and I have a private practice as well as an online program.
Mm-hmm.
So people work with me individually sometimes. There's many other Black therapists who, specialize in treating eating disorders, and we're training more and more. So I'm the co-chair of the African American Eating Disorder Professionals slash BIPOC committee under IADEP, which is the International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals.
Okay.
So AAEDP
Yeah, I was
slash
going to ask you.
AAEDP dash BIPOC is a subcommittee, and
Mm-hmm.
if you're a therapist or we have people from all over the world who join,
Mm-hmm.
and our committee is responsible for educating them about the issues of Black people and people of color, Indigenous people with eating disorders. So we have webinars online. If you're a member of IDEP, you can access webinars, blogs, etc., about this very topic. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really
Oh,
appreciate
it's been a pleasure. I look forward to hearing from you as you go through your journey. I hope you'll keep in touch.
I will. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross. You take care.